Welcome to WSIU On Topic. I'm Jennifer Fuller. These are three special editions of WSIU On Topic over the next 3 weeks. We're now less than 2 weeks before the November 6th midterm election. In the last week, there was a debate between the 12th District Congressional candidates in Southern Illinois. We'll talk about polling numbers, we'll talk about money, and President Trump plans a visit to this region. Our guests this week include Jak Tichenor, who is the host of Illinois Lawmakers on public television statewide, as well as Todd Graham, who is the director of debate at Southern Illinois University, and John Jackson, a visiting professor with the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute at SIUC. Gentlemen, thanks for coming in.
Good to be here.
Yeah.
Let's get right to the thing that happened this week. This was the only broadcast debate between the candidates in the 12th Congressional District. Todd, you're the director of the debate. The big question is, who won?
Well, everybody always wants to know who won at the end of a debate, and sometimes the easiest answer is really nobody, right? You look for things like knockouts in debates, and you always want to read about that, but usually that just doesn't happen. If your candidates are competent, which they were, then you have a pretty standard debate. I do want to start with, I told you earlier I had a surprise answer to the question of who won the debate, and it really is y'all. Jak, as you know, moderated the debate, and you were one of the questioners, Jennifer, and local media is so important in getting a good debate, having the right questions, having the right topics, and so I thought you all guided the debate well. There was no, if you noticed, there was no meanness or extra spiritedness, during or after the debate. So it was actually, I thought, a little bit better than some of the presidential debates we had last year. But beyond that, who wins these debates is usually determined by who's leading in the polls, and I always say don't take a risk if you're ahead. And I think Mike Bost probably did all right because of that, because he was doing well in the polls. Nothing came across badly for him. And so if you can get in and out of the debate when you're leading and without being sort of unscathed, then that's a win. And so I would say that Mike Bost had a good debate. But I was generally impressed by all three. They knew what they were talking about.
Mike Bost, of course, the incumbent Republican, his challenger, Democrat Brendan Kelly, and another challenger, Green Party, Randy Auksher, all a part of that debate. Jak, we should also say thank you to our partners on that debate. They include the Southern Illinoisan and the Belleville News Democrat, as we've partnered with them in the past.
And the League of Women Voters of St. Clair County a little earlier in our debate up at Belleville, too.
That's right. When we look at this race, going into Tuesday's debate, there were some new poll numbers out. What was a neck-and-neck race turned into maybe a little bit more of a cushion for Representative Bost.
Right. The Cook Political Report takes into account a number of different factors as we look at things, and they're now saying the 12th district race in Illinois is now leaning back to leans Republican. It was in the toss-up category a little earlier, and that's largely because the latest New York Times poll out earlier this week shows Mike Bost with a 9% lead over Democratic challenger Brendan Kelly. Bost has 48%, Kelly's 39%. The big number, though, of course, and this is the one that we always wonder about, is the 11% undecided, and that's where we want to know where things stand with the Green Party in this case, because they were not polled. Randy Auksher wasn't a choice in this. So with 11% undecided, you have to wonder where that 11% is going to go home to. John, we've been talking this week about the fact that was it the past three contests, the Green Party has earned something between 5 and 7%.
5 to 7. I think the additional consideration there is for all of the polling that is public, there are also the private polling done by the candidates. The fact that the vice president's been in the district once or twice, president now his second time, Department of Ag secretary in yesterday,
yes.
All that indicates Republican polls show this is very close. They don't send the president, vice president, and secretary into a district where they are not somewhat concerned. So I'd be interested in those private polls, and the only way you can do that is look at where they're sending the top not surrogates, but the top people to help Congressman Bost.
We'll get to the visit from President Trump here in just a couple of minutes, but Mike Bost was the first Republican to hold this seat in decades. Yes. This is something that the Democrats have been targeting each year since he was elected. Is this year any different in your mind?
Yeah, because it's a midterm in the first term for a Republican president, you expect that to be the one where you can knock off an incumbent. Mike Bost is only 4 years in. He's still at least somewhat vulnerable, or we wouldn't be having this conversation. So Democrats thought they had a great candidate. This is a good year for us. Blue wave talk certainly added to that. So yeah, Democrats think that this is competitive.
And
If we-
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Jak.
Go ahead.
If we go with that 11% that perhaps watched this debate, Todd, what could they have seen? What should they have seen that might have swayed one way or another?
Well, I thought Randy Auksher did great in the debate. He's, and I don't say that just because his office is literally right next to mine upstairs, controlling the air conditioner in my room. But I thought he was very impressive. I also do like the black and white sort of outfit that he's worn to both of the debates. But what that does is that pulls votes away from the Democrat. I mean, I don't think there's anybody sitting here today that's going to say that Randy Auksher is pulling votes away from Mike Bost. He's not. He'll be pulling, if he does, any votes away from Brendan Kelly, which is why I suggested to you that a strategy for Mike Bost would be to build up Randy Auksher in the debate. And indeed, Randy even said during the debate, "Thank you for not attacking me. I see I'm not being attacked." Well, that actually works a little bit better in Mike Bost's favor in the debate. So I thought for the debate, they were all competent. In fact, I would not have, and oftentimes I don't talk about what people are wearing, right? That's to me not terribly important in a debate. But I did think, and I've talked to a few people about that Brendan Kelly not wearing a tie and also not wearing a jacket, it just looked like he was sort of at the end of the day and a little bit tired. So listening to it on the radio actually is what I first did, and I thought everybody was fine. But when I watched it on TV, I actually thought Brendan Kelly looked a little bit more tired than usual. So Randy Auksher might have pulled a few votes away from him, and all of that is good for Mike Bost. The other thing to remember about Representative Bost is he's a winner. He's very good at elections. He famously, when the debate team won our first national championship in 2008, we got to go visit our state representatives, et cetera. It was the first time I got to meet Mike Bost. And he kind of regaled us with stories about how elections and people thought he was going to lose and how he comes from behind. So this is a man that knows how to win elections. And so I thought he handled the debate pretty well. And everybody who watched the debate, if you found at least that one thing that you liked about each candidate, you probably have a good candidate to vote for.
It was interesting to me that Bost, though, tended to go more to his notes than the other two gentlemen did, and that came off kind of awkward in a couple of instances.
He was reading his talking points. It was clear that he had prepared talking points. He went by all the Republican talking points. He did two things. One was to defend his record. The other was to defend the Republican record in the Congress. He came back to that again and again and again. The economy and the tax bill going to solve all your problems. So he had that that was his objective, whereas Kelly had to be playing offense. That's what challengers have to do. Kelly played offense, took the fight to Mike Bost, and no question it was back and forth between those.
One of the biggest criticisms from the Kelly campaign against the Bost campaign is that he hasn't been in district,
Exactly.
he hasn't been listening. Did that message come across, do you think?
Yeah, Kelly started out with that and came back to it again and again. And subtly it came across because Kelly kept going to those meetings, those individual names. He came back to that again and again. He had that planned. He executed that strategy to emphasize, at least subtly, that he was out and about and meeting real people.
I think that's an interesting point, John, because he did go to the individual names over and over and over again, and I think that may go back, Todd, to why he was wearing just the Oxford cloth shirt at the end of the day. Because hey, I'm out here, I'm trying to be one of the guys.
Yeah, the everyday people thing does work for some, doesn't work as well for others. I know I've tried to do that when I teach classes. There's just certain things I can and can't wear that make me look respectable or not. So some people can pull it off and some can't. I just thought at the end of the day, it made him look a little bit tired, at least when I watched him on TV that day. But I do understand the need for it. And I really like the fact that he began and then closed with the same idea, which is I've talked to people around here. I know the people around here. And like I said, I thought all three candidates had a particularly good debate, but the one that didn't have to have the strongest debate was Mike Bost. Even though he had talking points and you could tell he was reading from them, that's basically all he needs to do. We just need to remember a couple of things from the debate. And if we can remember one or two things and they were his talking points, then he did his job.
This is one of just many races across Southern Illinois that I want to get to over this episode and the next couple that we're going to. But Jak, before we get completely off of the 12th District, money numbers came in. We finished another quarter. It's time for candidates to report their earnings. lots and lots and lots of money in this 12th district race.
There's a lot in the 12th district races, of course, but the ones that are striking me are the ones in the local state house and senate races in southern Illinois. We've got a couple of them are already over the $2 million mark in our area. One of those, of course, is in the 118th district with Natalie Phelps Finney, the incumbent Democrat, against the Massac County State's Attorney Patrick Windhorst, the Republican. That one's topped the $2.5 million mark already, and we're seeing a lot of that money coming in from where you would think the House Republican organization, the Republican Party, of course, giving props to Patrick Windhorst, and the Democratic Party of Illinois doing a lot for Natalie Phelps Finney, as well as organized labor, and a number of the individual candidates who are not facing stiff election challenges, other members of the Democratic caucus in the House.
What do you expect to see as each side is predicting a wave, whether it's a blue wave or a red wave? Does that money really play into boosting a base or changing any minds?
It's difficult to say because John and I have had this discussion over the years about the negativity of the campaign spots that you see. And the fact that it doesn't really tell you anything much about where a particular candidate stands on issues like taking care of the pension crisis in the state of Illinois, or does the state of Illinois really need to move to a broader tax base, or the kinds of bread and butter things that really are decided in Springfield. All you're going to know from watching the evening news is so-and-so's a terrible person, they're liars, and the next spot goes back and says the same thing about the other person.
John, how does this play out? Does negative campaigning work?
Of course, we elect people all the time who've run really nasty, dishonest campaigns, and they go to White House, State House, they win all the time. Money is a necessary but not sufficient condition for winning. You've got to be at about 67 to 70% of your opponent to be in the game. You can't just get blown away. But if you can get to that threshold, and what the parties and other groups have done is to make these competitive races because they've been in with enough outside money.
And the game changer this time around, just like it was in the previous election cycle in the state of Illinois, is J.B. Pritzker's billions, because at this point, I just checked the stats this morning, he's put over $165 million into the race for governor. And if you look at the amount of the millions that have gone to the House Democrats, there's money that's gone to the Senate Democrats. That's been the big game changer, just like in the last contest in 2014, going back to 2014, the four-year contest, you had a situation where Bruce Rauner was doing the same thing for the House Republicans. They picked up a net gain of 4 seats. In this case, Mike Madigan is sitting on millions of dollars. He's expected to turn loose a massive advertising campaign for House Democratic candidates in the suburbs around Chicago, even as we speak. So Madigan has been in an interesting situation this time around. He's been able to raise money for his House Democratic caucus. He hasn't had to worry about raising money for a self-funded top-of-the-ticket candidate.
Before we get too far into the fundraising, particularly between Bruce Rauner and J.B. Pritzker, one of the things that may really move the needle for this 12th congressional race is a visit from the president, and that's scheduled for this Saturday at the Southern Illinois Airport. Todd, does the president's appearance change minds? Does it bolster the base? What's the big strategy here?
I mean, I think the president's strategy is to keep the base enthused. And you've seen that he's had more rallies in his first year and a half as president than anyone, I think, that we've ever seen do sort of this. He started his campaign for re-election the day after, I believe. He got the nomination. So one of the things about the Trump rallies, though, is it does keep his base energized, and it reminds them they need to vote. And perhaps the biggest thing, as you well know, in a midterm is getting the people energized who are already in power. So the same as the president. So the president's Republican, getting Republicans out in the midterm. And I do think that Trump's, sort of his rallies do that. There's the big difference in the Trump rally is it's all about persona and emotions. And so as we know, Trump is an emotional sort of president. We vote for him based on that. And so if he can get the people in that district, in that region, so when he comes to Murfreesboro, when he comes to the airport, if he can get the people sort of motivated, then yeah, I think it does make a difference, especially in smaller races when the turnout isn't so great for the population. If he can get a few hundred extra votes here or 1,000 extra votes here, that makes a huge difference in a region like this.
I agree with that, but it works both ways. This rally is going to energize Democratic base, and everybody who does not like Trump will have an incentive, perhaps even more than they've had before.
I was going to ask about the negatives there, Jak. Is there something that the Trump campaign, that the Bost campaign should be keeping an eye on during this visit?
Well, you don't want anything, no one wants anything bad to happen in terms of perhaps somebody getting into a fist fight or something like that, or maybe getting someone being hit by a car or something like that. You don't want anything negative like that to happen, obviously, and we're all hoping that things go well. It's interesting, John, you were talking about that bringing out Democrats. That New York Times survey a little bit earlier in the week showed Trump has a 50% approval rating in the 12th district, while 43% disapprove. 48% of those polled in this district say they want the GOP to continue in control of the House. So they're closer to the midpoint here than they might be, let's say, in the suburbs.
Yeah, and that, of course, those are not figures that represent the national or the state averages, but in this district, it certainly matters in terms of the contest that we're talking about.
This also, I'm sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I think one of the reasons that rallies help Trump is because while rallies do have the risk, right, everything has a risk in politics of bringing out your opponents, sort of at least the standard thinking goes, is that your opponents are already sort of motivated. So the Democrats are already motivated. So and we see on the news Trump talking about a rally, especially if he does something that's questionable in a rally. So if something comes up nationally, Democrats will see that and want to get out the vote. So it's really, does it locally make more people angry than it locally makes more people excited? And so that's the real question. And so given your polling numbers and the fact that we might be leaning a little bit more Republican anyway, will it get more Democrats to come out? I think the answer is, unless his rally does something that we're afraid of, unless something bad happens, then probably it helps Republicans.
And I just saw something this morning, back to John's point, Nate Silver's 538 report now today shows Democrats leading Republicans 50% to 42% in a generic congressional ballot.
Sure. We'll certainly keep an eye on that. This is something that we're going to wrap up next week after the president's visit.
The one thing I did want to add is
Sure.
the reason it becomes a risk is because of all the things that have happened in the last couple of days, right? So we've had a lot of bombings and bomb threats of people who Trump specifically attacks in his rallies. And so the question is he going to be able to dial that down, or is he going to do something that makes it worse in his rally? So the risk to the Murfreesboro rally, because he's only got one rally between these sort of bomb threats and the rally, the risk is that maybe Murfreesboro is where Trump goes back to being Trump and does something that he shouldn't do. And so that's what I would caution. Just keep trying to get your voters energized, et cetera, but he's got to make sure and sort of not do anything that inflames the rhetoric any further, because then Murfreesboro will be center of the map in the United States of America if he says something that's offensive.
One of the things that I hear when I'm out in the community among every voter, regardless of their party, regardless of their persuasion, is the money that's going into campaigns. And Jak, we touched on this a little bit earlier with the amount of money that J.B. Pritzker, in particular, the Democratic nominee for Illinois governor, against Republican Bruce Rauner and the other challengers, it's making national headlines at this point. He's now poured more money into his campaign, his own personal money,
Right.
than anyone in history.
Yeah, and the last I saw for Bruce Rauner was around $79 million to J.B. Pritzker's $165 million. So we're closing in on that record $300 million race that was in California a few years ago. We might still be able to go north of that. And the other thing is, as we were saying a little earlier, a lot of that money is percolating down to those local races for state house and state senate in the state of Illinois. And you simply can't overlook the impact of that money at the local level.
John, when you look at money like this, does it price the common person out of politics altogether?
Absolutely. The only way the common person can participate is to dial in and give money. And more and more people are doing that. For example, in the Bost-Kelly race, a lot of people on both sides, but Kelly has more people that are under 250 donors than Bost by considerable magnitudes, about 75 to 46 or something like that. You can still participate. You can't run for office unless you have huge PACs and huge mega donors, or unless you're Bruce Rauner and J.B. Pritzker and there are not very many billionaires out there wanting to run.
A lot of people talk about money walking. There have been numerous controversial ads in this race for Illinois governor, even going back into the primary where Republican Jeannie Ives was running against Bruce Rauner, and there was a campaign ad that drew a lot of criticism. Now the Rauner campaign is out, Jak, with a new commercial that it's raising a lot of eyebrows.
It's the unholy union spot where Mike Madigan and J.B. Pritzker are married. And that punches a lot of people's buttons, as you might imagine. And especially at the end of it, where the preacher now says, and I can't say it on TV, I'll just say that it's bleeped out and the F-bomb is dropped. The gay rights groups are condemning this ad because it comes 5 years after same-sex marriages were legalized in the state of Illinois. Rauner, of course, wouldn't use the same word. When he was asked about it by reporters, he just referred to, well, maybe the people of Illinois have been screwed. But it's a new low, but every day is a new low, it seems, in the kind of environment we live in today.
That's precisely the direction that I wanted to go. John, where does this end? When does the pendulum swing back in another direction?
I'm not sure anytime soon, because our politics are getting more toxic. When you're getting constant streams of toxic messages from the leadership, whether it's state or national, that just encourages everybody to go as low as possible. Until that changes, until that whole ethos, that culture changes, we're just going to see people. I thought a few years ago that words you only saw on public restroom walls would not be on television commercials, and I came into my room and saw that ad that we're just talking about, and I said, oh my, I thought we'd already hit bottom. So who knows? I don't think it's going to change anytime soon.
I wanted to talk about winners win. It's a policy sort of in politics, but also in debate. So my debate teams have had lots of experience with this, which is we will keep doing whatever it is, as long as we keep winning. So if these ads are effective and that person wins, then we'll keep doing it. So if the negative ads keep helping get people elected, then I don't see that changing either. So the real question is, what would get people to shift? Now, on our debate team, we were doing very well throughout the seasons and winning a lot, and so people would try different strategies, and sometimes they were like negative political ads. People would come up and they would be completely rude to us, trying to get us off of our sort of game in the debate round, and eventually, and they did this for almost a full semester, everyone across the country, UCLA, Oregon, et cetera, and eventually they found out it didn't work. We still kept winning. And so they changed their tactics and they went to a softer, kinder, more gentler sort of opponent. And I don't think that's any less true for politics today. I don't see it changing as long as it's still effective. So we just have to get people to win elections without doing that in order to really change
At the end of the day, does this get to a zero-sum game? Because you're talking about votes at the ballot box, votes in the General Assembly or in Congress. When they start to see the numbers of people not voting go down, does this change, Jak?
It certainly burns out a lot of people. As much as I am interested in the game, I tune the stuff out, and I suspect a lot of other people do the same thing. But they do move numbers. We have seen the governor's race tighten up in recent weeks. The Simon poll earlier in the month had J.B. Pritzker up by 22%. The last poll I saw as of October 16th showed that lead shrinking to 13 points. So as John had predicted earlier, we're starting to see some of those numbers start to close up.
John, in the current climate with roughly 10 days before the election, still a lifetime in terms of an election season?
Not really. It's almost a baked cake. It's very hard to move those numbers that much, because even in our poll, which was a month out, and all the others, the undecided's simply not enough. And what's happening is the partisans, particularly the Republicans, are going home, going to vote now for the governor. And I expected that would happen, but it just looks like too deep a hole to climb out of.
Is Sam McCann's Conservative Party challenge hurting Bruce Rauner? He's very sensitive about it.
Well, it definitely is, and so is Cash Jackson. That was 5 and 6 in all the polls, but it's like the point you were making about Randy. It's clearly taking away, in this case, from the governor.
What about those local races when you've got a large governor's race, a large spread in the governor's race, but some of these local races are a little bit closer? Is there a chance for someone to make a move here?
That's hard to predict. I think what's left is really the ground game, and I think we will now see at the end of it all who has the best get out the vote campaign. The ground game really makes up now for the fact that the air wars are probably a draw on balance. So who's going to get those people? And early voting has already started. We're having record turnouts and absentees. That is all that you can have an impact on.
Jak, just about a minute remaining or so. What should people be watching for over the next week to 10 days?
I think what John was just talking about, the get out the vote effort, the actual getting people to the polls here in these last few days, because that's really the ground game now is going to be the payoff in these margins narrowing at the end of the day. And one of the things that's happened in this particular race is some of the money that J.B. Pritzker has invested has gone directly into developing a Democratic ground game all across the state of Illinois, and he's been particularly interested in those state house and Senate races.
And that's certainly something that we're going to keep an eye on. The election is November 6th, and we're keeping an eye on that money, the polling, the people, all of that right here on WSIU On Topic. I'd like to thank our guests, Jak Tichenor of Illinois lawmakers, excuse me, sorry about that, Jak, and John Jackson of the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute, and Todd Graham, the Simon Institute and the SIU debate team. I'm Jennifer Fuller. Thanks for watching On Topic on WSIU.